Welcome everyone to a special edition of the Fantasy Formula. Rob and I are joined today by the lead commentator for Formula 3 and Porsche Supercup, who's entering his second season as the voice of F1 Kids. He's competing in the F1 Live Fantasy League alongside other F1 TV personalities, and he currently sits at P5. It's none other than Chris McCarthy. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Rob. Yeah, it's a real pleasure to be here. Obviously, it's a pleasure to be back, also commentating F1 Kids again. But more than ever, also entering the F1 Fantasy League as well. It's been an extra joy to the season. So it's a privilege to be on the podcast as we start a new season of Formula One, and what a weekend we've just come off the back of as well.
It's obviously very exciting to have you on the show, Chris, and particularly with the performance of your fantasy team so far through the season. Looking forward to chopping that up a little bit later in the show, but I think it'll make for a really entertaining discussion when we get to that point. So thanks again.
Yeah, no, coming in as the new person, I took it very seriously. I've had a lot of support from my dad, who's a big F1 fan. As soon as I told him I was in this league, he was like, right, we need to try and get a good team together here. So we spend our journeys down to the studio trying to put together. But as my team name says, not just do I do the support stuff, I need a call for help for my team. So it's great to be on your show. I want to catch back up to the leaders. So yeah, I'm going for the win this season.
Fantastic. Chris, I'm dying to hear a story about your relationship with the star of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, and that's Ollie Bearman. He stepped in for Carlos Sainz on short notice. He had this huge P7 result and a runaway driver of the day victory. You had a very early look at Ollie to start your broadcasting career. Could you tell us that story?
Yeah, I mean, Ollie was was in the first ever race I ever commentated on. Actually, my commentary journey started in 2014 at something called the Kartmasters British Kart Grand Prix, which Lewis Hamilton won in 1996. George Russell won it in 2010. So all the stars of Lando Norris raced in it, but it was the first thing I ever commentated on live in 2014, and a certain Ollie Bearman was racing in what was probably one of his first ever national races. He was just 8 years old. He raced in a class called Honda Cadets, which is for 8 to 12-year-olds, and he finished fourth that day as one of the youngest drivers on the grid. And that was where it was the first live thing I'd ever commentated on. I really got thrown into it, having come off the back of racing for a few years myself. And I went on to then commentate on British Championships the next year, and I kind of followed Ollie throughout that. I commentated on him throughout, coming up through cadets and then into his European career, and then again as a Formula 3 and Formula 2 driver. So yeah, for me it was quite strange over the weekend, because 10 years ago I remember seeing him as an 8-year-old and seeing his dad Dave and both his parents and also his mechanic, Jamie Smith, was on the grid with him last weekend. I don't know if everyone knew this, but Jamie Smith was his mechanic in karting and has stayed by his side up the way to F1. So it was a really lovely story that was playing out over the weekend, and he was stood by his side on the grid, and that was the same person that was on the spanners for him doing up his tyres when he was in karting, and he stayed by Ollie's side. So seeing those two again was a lovely story, and seeing him on the grid was fantastic. So yeah, for me it was brilliant to see that, and almost quite emotional.
I mean, considering how well he performed, over a decade ago when you first saw him, to put in a momentous performance on the weekend, obviously probably strikes a lot of excitement into the hearts of those that have been following him for so long. But if we are Ferrari, he's obviously deputised for Sainz in Saudi Arabia, maybe even in Australia. What would you expect to see from Ollie in the next race if he does continue in place of Sainz to earn a seat on the grid, whether that's with Haas or elsewhere in 2025?
Firstly, I think we've shown that he's not afraid to go for it, right? I mean, that qualifying performance, he basically put everything on the line. He hit the wall a couple of times I don't think it was like mistakes. It was, all or nothing performance, and gave it absolutely everything in the race. I think scoring points on the board was really impressive. He sits 10th in the championship, which I saw today, which is really impressive, isn't it, when you consider he's only just behind Lewis Hamilton, which is amazing. So I think his place at Haas should be guaranteed, and I think if he can get there now, he's shown that he's able to get round a race, with no problem at all. He's able to make places. He's able to control a car around with one of the highest speed circuits on on the calendar with absolutely no problems, despite only doing one free practice session. So, he's shown he's got the tools to do it. So I think if he goes into a Haas car or a Ferrari car, he's able to put points on the board, which is what he did. So he's a very exciting young talent, and it was a great first audition.
It was a real joy to see, for sure. And now Ollie and Ferrari are in the mix with a lot of these teams after Red Bull at the top of the constructors table. What teams do you think will stand out in the rest of the season? And do you think we'll have another open battle for P2 of the Drivers' Championship?
In terms of other teams that will stand out, obviously there was a lot of talk around the RBs coming in, but I think McLaren put in a really good performance, haven't they? They've seemed to have jumped ahead of Mercedes, who haven't really got the start of the season I don't think they would have hoped for. Ferrari have definitely taken up that place of second in the championship so far. Red Bull, streaking clear, but I think the McLaren car looks really good. Oscar Piastri put in a great performance to get that fourth place. Great fight with him on circuit as well. I thought he put in a really good performance. So, the McLaren car, there was, I guess, at some points, questions over it in testing, but it's looking really, really strong, and they have almost surpassed Mercedes. So Mercedes needs to try and bounce back from this, because they've had a bit of a lackluster start in some respects, so they need to try and catch back up now, and it has lost me some points, so I hope they do, but no, I think McLaren are looking really, really good, and Fernando Alonso's performance was very solid as well. So that's, although Stroll had his problems in the race, I think Aston Martin can take a huge amount of benefits from their performance, as can, I think, the surprise team has been Haas, right? I mean, that's been their qualifying pace has been good, but Nico Hülkenberg back in the points for the first time since Australia in terms of full Grand Prix. So that was one of the standout performances. I think his 100th points finish as well, which was a great result for the Hulk. So I think that was one of the standout performances as well, which was probably oversighted by all the Ollie Bearman excitement.
Yeah, it's obviously very clear after two races, the gulf between the top five and the bottom five. And, you mentioned Hulk's solitary point for Haas. Do you think there's going to be any other surprises kind of in the midfield battle and such? Obviously, Alpine are perhaps coming in a little lower than maybe a few of us had expected. But, putting aside the top five, which look pretty clear cut, there's a lot of seats on the line for 2025. Any bold predictions from team performances, driver results that you think could, come into play for next year?
Just having a look. Having a look, really. I mean, there's definitely drivers with things to prove, isn't there? Alex Albon's got a seat that he'll want to be fighting for. The guys at, Haas definitely have things to fight for now after that performance from Ollie Bearman as well. Williams likewise. There's great young drivers that are coming through as well. I'm interested to see what the Sauber car can do. I mean, it's looked fairly solid at times. I think it's an important season for Zhou Guanyu with the calendar going back to China now for the first time. I think he's got a big season ahead of him. Obviously, Valtteri trying to lead that team. They're going to be going into a pretty important stage of that team development soon. We've got Zane Maloney doing really big things in Formula 2. So, we're talking about this silly season and bold predictions that could happen. I think there are big performances that need to come from their drivers this year. Otherwise, Sauber have just picked up the boy from Barbados who's got off to a winning start and leads Formula 2. I'm interested to see what happens over at Sauber, because there's a driver over in Super Formula. Didn't get the best of start to his seasons, Théo Pourchaire, but he's waiting in the wings. And then we've got this new kid, Zane Maloney, who's absolutely flying as well. I'd like to see what happens there. I think Sauber could be one of watch, but I'm also interested with the RBs. I think everyone's interested with the RBs, right? It was the car everyone was talking about in testing hasn't really got going yet, so I'm not too sure why that is, but I think watch this space on that one. I think there's more parts to come to it.
The battle in the midfield is definitely a big part of our fantasy lineups, because Rob and I have been running RB for the last few weeks with some mixed results, to say the least. So we're definitely keeping a close eye on some of that.
Yeah, I was told. I mean, Sam Collins, down at technical, said the RBs is a great team to run. For some reason, it hasn't got going. But I've got to say, Yuki's doing really well in the fight with Daniel Ricciardo, isn't he? Didn't flatter himself after the Bahrain Grand Prix, but he's done well. I know Daniel had a pit stop problem at the weekend where he was delayed in coming in, but it's a real big season for him as well, isn't it? There's Red Bull Juniors waiting in the wings, so that's going to be a really good inter-team battle as well. I think Daniel trying to get what could be a vacant Red Bull seat, Yuki trying to hold that seat. But are they going to get going? And if they don't, then what can the likes of Sauber and Haas do? Can they then start challenging RB? So, yeah, it's going to be a real interesting one. I worry for Alpine, though. I think we all do down the bottom. I mean, they're really struggling, although they seem to be gaining good points as they just start moving through the field whilst everyone else battles away with each other.
So these battles will rage on the track and in our fantasy lineups, too. I want to turn now to your work in Formula 3 because it's such a fascinating series. You have 30 cars that are on the grid with no pit stops, a shortened race length, so there's just nonstop action throughout the featured race. What do you do to keep your facts straight while commentating so much action in front of you?
Yes, I mean, it's firstly Formula 3, fantastic championship to watch. Similar to Ollie, I've followed a lot of these guys from karting, so I know a lot of them really well. I try and keep across, I keep sheets of their results from qualifying and things like that from the past. I've got that from the past 3 seasons now, which is really useful, and just keep across something on each driver. Really, I've got info on every single driver. But I guess having that relationship with them, I commentated on the FIA karting championships in 2018, and if you look at that grid and Formula 3's grid, it is pretty much identical. So that really has helped me with them. But yeah, it's hard to keep track of all of them, but that's the beauty of the championship. There's so much going on in it, and every time you go in, you really don't know who's going to walk away the winner. We've just had a fantastic first round, I think, in Formula 3. A 16-year-old who came in, who won the first race in the Red Bull Junior car, which no one expected, I don't think. And then Luke Browning, who won the World Cup out in Macau, came in and got his first ever Formula 3 win in the feature race. So 2 new winners, and the person who was labelled the favourite didn't get any points. So only got 2 for pole position. So that was shows you how unpredictable Formula 3 is. The racing is really fantastic, and I'd say there's 15 or 16 drivers that could be champion. If they did a fantasy league for that, it would be it would be very, very difficult. Let's just say that, but very, very fun at the same time. They're really great kids. One thing I do as well. I'm obviously commentating it from the studio, so I do keep in touch with all of them throughout the weekend just to see how the cars are performing, what problems they're having, how the track is performing, and a lot of the things we got from Bahrain was the wind was affecting the cars and stuff like that helps, and having Alex Brundle and the experience he's got really helps as well.
You mentioned obviously all of these up and coming drivers that are currently in F3 and the more junior leagues of motorsport. I think looking at the drivers on track today in Formula 1, we've got Yuki, Oscar, who won F3 in 2020, Logan and Liam, who obviously drove for AlphaTauri last season. They're all F3 graduates. Are there any drivers on the F3 grid today that you could see making that step to F2 and ultimately to F1 down the line?
Yeah, plenty. I mean, we've got 9 F1 juniors in there so far. So we've got, Luke Browning, obviously, is a Williams Academy driver who took the first feature race win. Hasn't had the easiest ride up, I don't think. He's come from racing mostly in the UK, but he's starting to really show his form, and I think performances like winning Macau can really change his career. So he's definitely one. I think another one is Dino Beganovic, who I mentioned the championship favourite having a bad start. That was him, but I think we can see drivers like that turn things around. FRECA champion, and he did that, really convincingly as well. So I think he's another one to watch, backed by Ferrari. Then we've got Gabriele Mini, who's backed by Alpine, Italian F4 champion as well in 2020 with Prema. He's now back with that team. Could easily move up with them into Formula 2. So that's straight away, we've got some there. And then Red Bull have just taken, I think, 4 drivers into into Formula 3, one of them being Tim Tramnitz, a young German driver who is very, very quick, and he got onto the podium straight away, racing with MP Motorsport. And they've got a young Polish driver called Kasper Stuka who just won the Italian F1 Championship as well. So there's F1 juniors up and down the grid. It's very exciting. You know, Sophia Flörsch is in there. She's an Alpine junior as well. It's kind of packed with F1 juniors. I think the fact there is 9 of them means there is a very possible opportunity that one of them is going to move up. I think on average 5 to 7 move up to Formula 2 every year. So the top 5 went up last year, so I think there's going to be definitely a few. But the ones that stick out for me, Dino Beganovic, definitely, Gabriele Mini, they've moved up together in a kind of head-to-head rivalry, and then Luke Browning is coming up as another really exciting package as well, along with Tim Tramnitz.
Well, Dino Beganovic, he's going to be on my watch list for my fantasy team in a couple of years if he makes the jump up to Formula One. So we'll watch him closely. Yeah, no, he's really exciting, and then you've got sons of Formula One drivers. You know, Alexander Wirtz's son Charlie's just entered. Really exciting. And then Juan Pablo Montoya's son is in there. And we had an iRacing driver, Max Esterson, who used to be top 50 in the world in iRacing just a few years ago. He come from New York. That's what he did 5 years ago. In 5 years, he's come from being just racing in his front room to F3 driver. So he's another really good story, actually. And he was 6th, I think, in his first race. So he's another one we're all keeping an eye on.
I want to switch gears now to your other big commentary role this year on F1 Kids. So you started this role last year when F1 unveiled this all-new experience to bring young fans closer to the sport. Can you talk us through what the call-up to F1 was like and what was going through your head when you got this big news that you'd be commentating for F1?
Yeah, surreal, definitely. You know, I kind of started my journey with them commentating Porsche Supercup in 2022, but the role to then say you're going to be commentating on a Formula One race for the first time was a dream come true for me. The first one I did was Singapore Grand Prix, which was a bit of a good one, really, wasn't it? I mean, I think we all remember that one from last year when Carlos Sainz went and won the race. So I think every time we've done an F1 Kids race, something dramatic happens. We said that on the broadcast yesterday, or Saturday rather. But it was a dream come true for me. I mean, when I started doing all this in 2014, it was always a goal, but one that you just kept in the back of my mind, and I always wanted it to happen, but I always took it year by year. And then when I finally got the news, when I got the news, it came really unexpectedly that, oh, by the way, can you commentate Formula One? I was really blown away by it, to be honest, and went straight out to celebrate with my family, and then the hard work had to begin. I guess it was so surreal preparing for an F1 race and doing notes on Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc. It was bizarre, and I remember sitting there with getting a grid sheet printed with all their names on, and thought, wow, this is actually happening. And but I got to say, the kids were so confident. I thought, I was the most nervous one in the room. I'll happily admit that. I thought I was going to have to be the one keeping them, keeping them from not getting so nervous. But the kids, I've got to say, they're so talented, and they all came in and were absolutely fine. I was pacing around the studio before the first broadcast, just trying to calm myself down, trying to come to terms with the fact that I was about to do an F1 race, and then, but once we went live, it all sort of sunk in, really, and it was a very surreal experience, that first race. But now it's sort of starting to get used to it, I guess, in a weird way, which feels surreal to say, but I don't take it for granted. Every time we hit the record button is very special, and Saturday was no different.
That's obviously really exciting, and you mentioned obviously you work with another recognisable face in Alex Brundle in the commentary box. Yeah, obviously a very different type of commentator to the kids. Do you find that your preparation is any different when you're preparing for these F1 Kids commentary gigs, or is it really?
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. The idea, as you would have seen by tuning in, F1 Kids is an alternative broadcast to the norm. When you tune into your normal F1 commentary, the idea is that they talk you through the race and give you all the facts and stats you need to keep you on track of how the race is moving. F1 Kids is not really designed to do that. We're here to make it fun. We're here to make it informative, but to a junior level, but more than anything, it's fun. If there's a change for ninth place and we miss it, it doesn't really matter. And we're the C3, the C4, the C5. They're red, yellow, and white to us on F1 Kids. So it is really my prep for F1 Kids Saudi Arabia was finding fun facts about the track, the town, the new track, the theme park that's going to be there, the Red Sea, the things like that, about the cars, how fast do they go, what does that compare to? So making it so that kids can tune into it and learn about the sport, but in a fun way and in an understandable way. The cars themselves, the technical stuff, we'll leave that to the world feed, and the guys are there for a reason to do that because they're so good at it. For us on F1 Kids, it's about us just enjoying the race and hopefully you enjoying it with us. So yeah, that's the idea of it, and that's why the graphics are the way they are, and I think the team do a really good job at it. So that's kind of what we do.
I totally agree. And I watched the race on F1 Kids with my 5-year-old over the weekend, and we had a blast. We were naming all the different kinds of sharks that you can find in the Red Sea. We were playing Name That Camel with you. I was yelling at the celebrity cam. So it is just a really fun time and a very approachable way for kids to start to learn what is a very technically complex sport. So bravo to you and the team on that.
No, thank you. Yeah, so, we came up with some ideas like, it was that. It was, we found the world's fastest fish lives in the Red Sea. I couldn't wait to tell the kids that. I even quizzed Alex Jakes and Alex Brundo about it the day before. And we had loads of, questions planned, and we planned to quiz the kids and also try and get that engagement with people watching with their children at home. So that's the idea. I'm glad it's working, and we plan to do so much more of it when we return at Monaco.
It's probably concerning the world's fastest fish might be a bit quicker than the Alpine. So let's see what those upgrades are looking like for Alpine heading into the rest of the season.
Yeah, we'll leave that one for you guys to say. But
speaking of young talent, we have a lot of viewers that are looking to break into motorsport, and I bet they would want to hear from you what advice you would give to someone considering a career in the commentary box.
Yeah, no, good question. I think the first advice I'd give really is trying to just create your own opportunities. There are plenty of opportunities out there, but the best way to do it, I think, first of all, is to start by trying to create your own one. That's how I started. Like I said, my journey in this started 10 years ago, 2014, commentating on Ollie Bearman at Kartmasters. That kind of came around by the fact that I was, first of all, at college, filming my own races. I used to race myself for 5 years. I had to stop because of my epilepsy, and then I was at college doing TV and film, and I started filming the races I used to race in, and it was only off the back of that I then started commentating on those races, which I didn't actually have to do. It was just to, I guess, make the content a bit better. My dad kind of said to me, look, you should really put some commentary over this, and it was never meant to happen. I never sort of set out to do any of this, but yeah, I started commentating over the top, really enjoyed it, and when that all stopped, I went to the track that I was doing this all for and said, can you let me do this live? They never had a commentator at the track before. They never even considered it, but I just said, I'd love to do this. I'd love to do this live, and the first time I went to do it, the speakers didn't even work. But then these guys from Kartmasters happened to be there whilst I was speaking to myself in a room, essentially, because the speakers weren't working. And they had this Kartmasters event the next week and needed a commentator, and that was sort of how it started for me. So I guess you could say that's an example of it. But what I mean by creating your own opportunities, go to your local track, your local kart track, pitch the idea out there. If they don't have one, if they do, jump in, see if you can ask the commentator to join them. The commentator might even let you pick the mic up for a race while they take a break, or might let you share it with them. And from the back of that, you never know, you might just start picking up some opportunities. Someone did that with me with an event I was doing in Teesside, which is up north here in England. And he just said, can I just come and share it with you, And I said, yeah. And next thing, he did essentially. I said it's easier for you to do this, and he ended up doing that job now since I think 2018, and he's now commentating all over Europe. So, so that's just an example. Really, it's best if you want to do it, just go out there and go and find your own opportunities, and they'll come to you.
Speaking of opportunities, Adam and I have obviously capitalized on the new F1 fantasy landscape that seems to have really taken on a mind of its own in the last couple of seasons, and created our own channels, and are really seeing the growth in that community on Twitter, on YouTube, wherever it might be. Is this your first season playing the game? Obviously, there's quite a number of you on F1 Live League that have a bit of a rivalry. How have you found it? Just give us the rundown on your season so far.
It is my first time, when I kind of joined in, I heard this league was happening. I'd heard the guys have been talking about it on air before, and I thought, right, I need to get my head around this quickly. I called on the support of my dad, who's a big F1 fan, and he helps me. He always helps me get down to the studio and stuff. So we kind of use that journey to get our team together, so to speak. But yeah, look, I'm really enjoying it so far. To the point, I've got 3 teams going, and I use the others as a bit of a way to test things out, which is annoying because my B team had Sergio Perez in on a 2 times DRS boost as well, so that was quite frustrating. But no, I got to say, it's great fun. I don't know why I didn't do it sooner, to be honest. Now I've started doing it. It's really, really good fun. I'm loving the F1 Live League as well. It's really cool to kind of have that interaction with the other guys on the team. There's definitely some rivalries going on within that team, isn't there? When we all go back to the hotel in the evening, we're all talking about it. So I'm sure once we get into the end of the season, we're all going to be chasing down Jolly and Palmer again.
And when you started building your first teams this season, did you have any particular approach that you went toward, either going heavier on the drivers, heavier on the constructors, or was it just you and your dad in the war room trying to figure out how to get the best possible team for Bahrain?
To be honest, I had no idea, but when we read the points, we figured out that going heavy on the constructors was the approach basically that we took. Like let's get Red Bull and Ferrari in there, and then go from there basically. That was kind of the approach we took, and see how much money we've got left to spend after that. Once we got Red Bull and Ferrari in, we thought we'd get good points off them, and then we went and just basically spent what money we had left. We chose Lewis Hamilton as we thought he would, have a good start to the season, which hasn't really come to fruition. And then we decided to just, get some RB drivers in. We thought they'd go well early on. We put an Alpine in. I put Pierre Gasly in. I'm a bit of a loose fan of his, and then we put Albon in. We thought he's a solid pair of hands, really. So yeah, we tried to put solid drivers in across the board, but really the focus was on constructors, and that was where we thought we'd get our big points.
Oh, well, all the makings of a successful team, and I think even though you said you probably weren't too pleased with your Saudi Arabia performance, I think it's certainly got the foundations to build on into the next few races. And we do see a lot of the other F1 TV pundits, Laura, Will, Lawrence, etc., talk about their fantasy teams in the weekend warm-up show and on social media.
Yeah.
What do you think of that? What do you think that increased emphasis and presence in those kind of mediums means moving forward? Are there any off-screen rivalries with those guys or others in the paddock that you have for your F1 fantasy?
It's all great fun, isn't it? It's like us having that league going is just great fun. It's great stuff to talk about, and great to see at the end of the weekend who's done well and who hasn't really. And I think it's just a great fun thing to have. I like I said, I wasn't doing it last year, but I always remember the guys were speaking about it, and it was always fun seeing who was doing well. And and it was just something throughout testing it. I know everyone that was out there certainly was tracking down who's going to be good, not just for their job, but also for the fantasy team. So yeah, it just adds that extra element of fun between the team, I think. And I know everyone's really enjoying it, and I'm really enjoying it as well. So obviously I'm sort of more based at the studio, but I'm really enjoying doing it. And sitting in fifth place, not too bad so far, but I could do with moving up a little bit, I think.
Well, Chris, before we let you go today, I wanted to challenge you to a little bet as we gear up for the Australian Grand Prix. Get a little rivalry going between you and the show. How's that sound? All right, here's what I propose. Your team versus mine for Australia next week. If you win, we'll send you a shirt of your choosing from our sponsor, Fifth Gear Garms. That way you can rock a great F1 shirt wherever you go. But if I win, I talked to you earlier about how my 5-year-old and I, we love F1 Kids. We enjoyed the broadcast last week. If you could film a quick shout out to my son, I think that would be a really fun punishment for you if you lose. What do you say?
Doesn't sound like a punishment, but yeah, that's a deal for me.
That sounds good. Well, it's a bet then. Chris, before you go, could you just tell everyone where they can find you this season? Because you're going to be very busy.
It's a great season coming up. I'm doing Formula 3, Porsche Supercup. Lined up to do some other stuff on the support bill as well. Obviously, you heard me doing the Formula 2. I did a Formula 2 feature race, so yeah, there's a chance that you might hear me on a couple more of those throughout the year as well, which is really exciting. F1 Kids, we're back for 7 races, like we mentioned. We've already ticked off one of those. I'm going to be doing Formula Regional European Championship by Alpine, FRECA, and very excited to say I'm going to be back doing 24-hour Le Mans as well this year as the circuit commentator. So if you're around the circuit, you'll hear me there. So I think that probably ticks off just about everything for this season. I've got another couple of things I'm doing over here, like British F3, sort of GB3 as it's now called. So yeah, no, it's a really exciting season ahead.
Wonderful, Chris. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today, and best of luck the rest of the season.
Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
We'll be back with more Fantasy Formula next week.